Joining us right now is Cisco CEO Chuck Robbins. And Chuck, thank you for being here. It's great to see you today.
Oh, it's good to be here with you guys, as always.
We talked a little bit in Davos with you just about the idea of what tariffs could mean. If we actually see tariffs go from 10% to 25%, what would that mean for your business?
Well, what we've talked about is, we were able to manage through the 10% tariff situation, but our belief is that if we go to 25%, it's going to become increasingly more difficult for us to pass that all through to our customers in order to remain competitive globally. So at that point, we're going to have to make a decision. Either we sacrifice the P&L or we make cuts other places. And if we make cuts other places, then you put R&D at risk. And this is not an environment, I don't think, where we want to see U.S. tech companies cutting R&D in light of the 5G transition and everything else. So we're still optimistic. And despite the rhetoric and the noise in the system, I think that most of that could be construed as negotiation, as we continue to see. But we're still optimistic that they'll at least make enough progress so that they find their way to a place where they don't have to do this in March.
Just in terms of your R&D spending, I think I read somewhere that you spent $4 billion a year on research and development.
In the U.S.
In the U.S.
Just
alone.
In the U.S., right.
So that money goes towards things like 5G development. What else are you working on? Things that could get thrown off?
Well, we're doing cybersecurity, R&D here. We're doing next generation infrastructure platforms. People don't understand what we do, but when everyone around the world looks at their cell phone and tries to actually initiate some sort of query, a great deal of the infrastructure that actually makes that happen is our stuff. And as the traffic and the video loads, et cetera, continue to increase on the internet, we have to build more and more high capacity equipment because the requirements are increasing, and a lot of that R&D is done here as well. So it's important stuff.
Cisco and other technology companies have applied to get exemptions from the tariffs. Have you received any of those exemptions or gotten any word on that?
Well, we worked through that on the 10%, and we were not successful. And up until recently, there was some debate as to whether there was going to be an exemption process for the 25%, but I think we all saw Lighthizer came out publicly and said that there would be. So we'll work through that, assuming that they start heading down that path.
Chuck, I want to talk to you about a big initiative that Cisco just took on this week, I think it was yesterday, where you're actually out trying to get Congress and other world legislatures to focus on privacy as an actual right for humans and work through legislation for that. Why did you take this on?
Well, we think, first of all, the tech industry has to actually play a role in so many of these critical policy issues. And this is one that's important not only to the technology sector, but also to, I think, the world taking advantage of what this technology can do. There's so much positive that can be done, whether we're delivering, broadband connectivity into rural parts of the world or the United States that have never had it before, so that we can connect people, so they can become educated, so they can actually, participate in this global macro expansion that we've seen. Or whether it helps us solve issues of hunger, water, homelessness, whatever they may be. And if we don't get past some of these fundamental principle issues, then we're never going to be able to do that. So we think that all tech companies need to stand up and try to help solve this problem and get to a resolution, and that's what we hopefully started yesterday.
When I just remember Tim Cook was in a position to be very strident about this issue because a lot of his business didn't depend on it quite as much as the people that run business that he was. And I think that kind of the same with you, Chuck. It's a lot easier for you to be out in front on this because it's not as important to your business model. I don't think we're going to see some of those other companies come out and say, "Yeah, Chuck, I'm with you 100%." They're like this loudmouth. What is he? Right? I mean, isn't it bifurcated in technology? People that benefit from not having this initiative go forward, and people where it doesn't really matter. Well, you're agnostic to it.
I think it's a matter of really deeply understanding what everybody's technology does, because I would suggest that it's not an issue that's not relevant to us. And Tim, clearly, it's not an issue. We were together last Friday. We talked about it.
But not as, people that sell privacy.
But all of us using his devices, we would like to make sure that we can continue to trust that the privacy is there. And I think that's one of the big principles that he stood on, which is great.
The business model isn't based on stealing people's private information and selling it to advertisers.
Exactly. So I can tell you that having gone through the Snowden situation, back from 2012, 2013, up until, for 3 or 4 years, and going around the world and convincing other governments that we were not giving special access to our products, and that privacy does matter, and that their sovereign rights matter. Yeah, it's a big issue to us.
Snowden is several years ago, but right now you have the Huawei situation that is front and center, and it does seem like you could be in a situation where China and some Asian nations, some of their partners are going to be siding with Huawei, and maybe Western nations are going to be siding with U.S.-based companies. Is that really happening? How big of a risk is that at this point?
Well, we're in the early stages of all of this discussion and what's going on around the world, and what I know are the same things that you see in the press and where countries have made certain statements. And what I will say is that I don't believe getting to some balkanized global internet is the right answer, because so many of the things that we can do with this technology, as I was saying earlier, are going to require us to maintain connectivity, which is why we have to get the privacy stuff right, the cybersecurity stuff right, the trust right, and notwithstanding whatever different governments think about technology providers, I think that's the focus, and we have to find a way to solve for things like privacy, things like trust, things like security across borders, so that we can continue to move forward and find a way to turn this massive expansion that we've seen on a global basis into something that benefits everybody.
Have you had conversations with other technology CEOs about this who might also think that, yes, this is something we really need to work together to get countries to do this, or are you kind of just out on your own and seeing what happens?
No. We have talked to several and lots of tech companies. They all understand it, because you can't build your services country by country and actually scale globally. It's just not going to work. So what's going to happen is, this is why you saw the European Commission working so hard on a single digital market, because if you get into a place where companies have to build out their services in every country, then the smaller countries just aren't going to stay at the forefront of technology offerings, because you can't afford to build out there. You're going to build out in the big countries, and you're going to let everybody else just slide.
I mean, you could make the case to maybe the laggards that it's in their best interest to get on board before, to be part of the process, instead of, let somebody else decide what's going to happen too. Is that part of your?
Well, I think that's true for laggards, leaders, anybody else.
Right.
I think
get involved ourselves before.
You should.
Yeah.
And look, here's the other thing you have to think about, and have empathy for these regulatory groups, these politicians that are trying to set regulation in the technology industry that is so complex and is moving so fast. And frankly, those of us who live in it every day, we have to work hard to keep up with it. And now we're asking people who aren't natural technologists to understand it deeply enough to come up with rational regulation that actually works for the country.
Financial services inquiries where, we're in trouble. I can't even imagine with technology.
It's incredibly difficult. So what we've tried to say is, let us partner to some extent. We don't have to define things for you, but let us do our part to try to educate you on the things we understand. They ultimately get to make the decisions, but I think we can do a better job of working with them to help educate them.
Is Congress responsive to this?
Yes, not just Congress. European Commission is responsive. Most every country on the planet, as long as you come in from a perspective of really trying to help them understand it.
Sure.
And is it self-serving?
Not dictate, but understand.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's self-serving from the perspective that I think that we want all this technology to be deployed globally for the right reasons. So.
You think buybacks are okay?
I do think buybacks are okay.
I know. I mean, I'm just watching some of the political discourse.
Or do you think they're okay?
Yeah, I absolutely think they're okay. I want to repatriate. When it comes back, it flows downhill to where it's supposed to go. I don't think if the organic growth for capital investment is there, it's there. Maybe, I saw Andrew actually said that maybe just incentivize some way for capital. I guess it's possible to do that, but some of the stuff that we're hearing from certain parts of the political spectrum it's pretty scary.
It's almost like this regulatory discussion we just had. You have to really understand how corporations work and which corporations are capital intensive and which are not. We are not a capital intensive business. So I have limited options for using capital on my balance sheet relative to M&A, relative to dividends, buybacks. I can't just flow it into my operating income.
A good start if certain people in the political arena would know most of the jobs come from the private sector. The government ones, you need the tax money from the private sector to pay for the government ones, don't you? I mean, The corporations aren't necessarily the enemy all the time.
Well, we're not. We have an ecosystem around the world of 70,000 companies that work with us to deliver our solutions. That's where the jobs get created, in those small, mid-sized companies that are working inside our ecosystem.
You got your rain gear? Ready?
I do have my rain gear.
Yeah, I know. Okay, good.
Joe does too.
Bring it with you today.
No kidding.
If you see, they get some weather out here. Climate change. Anyway, thank you.
Chuck, great to see you.